All right, we're going to shift gears now and bring on our next speaker. Our next speaker is Vince Kearns. Vince is the Senior Director of Cyber Risk for Trend Micro. He's a cyber risk specialist and is helping to shape the strategy for cyber insurance and the incident response ecosystem. Vince has held many senior management positions at Trend and has over 28 years of cyber experience. He's a net diligence ransomware advisory board member and frequently meets with Trend Micro customers and partners, sharing their cybersecurity message for risk assessment, management, and mitigation. Vince lives in Mansfield, Texas, and is joining us today. So, Vince, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And wow, what an act to follow. Matt had so many great things to say and some great advice. And the best part about what Matt was saying is it's a perfect lead into some actionable things around what we can do about it, right? And cyber insurance is absolutely one of the ways in which you can make it part of your overall risk strategy in order to mitigate risk and to offload risk. So, the topic today is what, the importance of cyber insurance. And before I jump in with a few slides, I wanted to talk about, why our customers, why do they have it, and what are the thought processes in order to get cyber insurance. And the first one that comes to mind is the peace of mind. So as Matt talked about, some of the bad things that can happen, and if you're unfortunate to be in the position where you have an incident and it is material and it has caused damage, having a cyber insurance policy is going to help keep you in business. They're going to help pay for the ransom in some cases. It's going to help you rebuild your network if you're going to if based on the severity of the damage. So really giving you that peace of mind. That's really why a lot of customers buy cyber insurance. But it's also becoming more and more a strategic part of a comprehensive risk strategy, and that if if a material incident happens, what are we going to do about that? And that's really the theme of the next 40 minutes. That preventing incidents completely, well, those days are kind of gone. And to Matt's point, it's what you do about it if you have an incident that is so important. And we're gonna address some key ways in which you're going to be able to do that. And then what we're seeing a lot driving cyber insurance adoption is being required to have a policy from one of your business partners. So if you do business with 3 entities, and to make your widget, some of those may require you to have a policy and vice versa. So, there's, everybody has their own reason, but, I do believe having a cyber insurance policy is a really strategic part of an overall risk strategy. So I'm going to share a couple of slides here. There we go. All right. So having talked a little bit about why we get insurance, we're going to talk a little bit about the current state, and there's some really interesting timelines around the state of the market and how it's evolving. What are the requirements of a good policy? So if you're looking for a cyber insurance policy, what can you expect from the carriers as far as their requirements to get a policy? Talk a little bit about navigating and then really talking to cyber insurance carriers. A lot of that is around showing cybersecurity maturity. A lot of what Matt talked about, in that if you have these things in place and you want a policy, or you want a better policy, having that cybersecurity maturity conversation with your carrier and broker is vital. Okay. So let's talk about the market, or the state of the insurance market. And I'm going to start at 2019 and before, and I call that easy street. The claims were low. Cyber insurance was the fastest growing segment of the insurance industry. because claims were low. There wasn't this ransomware outbreak that Matt was talking about and that we feel here at Trend Micro. And it was kind of easy to get a policy. You know, at the very beginning, there were 3 questionnaires that you were able to get a policy. And as I'm gonna show you, that has evolved into really some intricate ways in which the carriers identify risk. So 19 and before, easy street, really easy to get a policy. Well, what happened in 20 and 21? The ransomware outbreaks, and having an outbreak is one thing, but what was happening is customers were getting to the point where they needed to make a claim, and so claims were through the roof. Loss ratios for the insurance carriers got out of whack, and so a hardening of the market happened where premiums went up, coverage went down, exclusions were commonplace in a lot of the policies, and really, the cyber insurance industry was at a turning point, and what they were able to do out of it is really improve the resiliency of insureds by requiring certain security posture elements. And the threats are still where they've always been, but the claims are down because of resiliency, and that's because of the hardening of the market in 20 and 21. Well, if you look at 22 and beyond, or in the future, the carriers are getting really, really good at being able to assess risk, and we're going to talk about some of the ways in which they're doing that, and how you as a customer can prepare for that. So a little bit of background there on the evolution and why, if you've had a policy for a long time, it's a much different market these days. There we go. So what they're doing is they're learning from driving insurance. So, the Geico app that sits there and monitors your driving, right? And get that ongoing telemetry is something that a carrier, instead of just assessing risk at contract and renewal time, having the tools and the APIs available to assess risk in an ongoing way is something that is very important to them going forward. And then just the life insurance, learning from these questionnaires and the attestation of, am I a smoker or not, and things like that. So the cyber insurance industry, looking at these 2 more sustained long-term parts of insurance, they're learning. And as a side note, if you feel like, if you've had the insurance conversation, why aren't the carriers more able to provide the data? It's because they don't have the data. For life insurance and car insurance, decades of actuarial data that they can base the pricing on. They don't have that in cyber, and so it's something that's why they're having to hone the way in which they assess risk to whether they're going to take on that customer or not. Here's a quick sample application, and again, this is the security piece of it, and you can see the different levels of different ways they ask the same question, and there are better applications than others from my perspective, and they are getting better, right? Understanding what to ask, and not just, do you have MFA, yes or no? You've got to start talking about where you have MFA, because of if you don't have MFA on the box that gets hit, then there's a really good chance that the policy will not be honored. Okay. So overall, they're asking better questions. The applications are getting better. The preparedness. So Matt mentioned a couple times, and Jeff, I took notes as well, and is that it's not the breach incident itself that causes any damage to the customer. It's how they handle it. And you're going to see a couple of parts here in my presentation about an incident response plan, and that if the house catches on fire, whether you have an insurance policy or not, here's exactly what I'm going to do. Here's who's going to talk to who. Here's what I'm going to do. And if you don't have one, I've got a slide in here that can provide an option. But if there's one thing that you leave this 40 minutes with Vince with, is that if you don't have an incident response plan practiced and in place, I would encourage you to do so. So better questions, better preparedness, and the live telemetry going forward, and that being able to assess the risk on an ongoing basis. Best example there, Log4j. Your risk was level. You get hit with Log4j, your risk goes up, and the carriers would love to see that. You take care of Log4j, it comes back down. That's the live telemetry that I believe we're headed towards in the future. So what exactly does a cyber insurance policy cover, right? And as Matt talked about, I was just applying it to the whole cyber insurance process. You know, it's what happens if there's a material breach. What is a policy going to cover? The legal fees and breach coach. So if you've never been in that type of situation, a breach coach is appointed if you have a policy, and they are the quarterback in the incident. They're going to determine the severity and what to do and who to hire in order to go take care of the situation. If there has to be notification, you know, the forensics, the any type of media relations, and really, especially for publicly traded companies, the liaison between regulators. So the policy is going to cover the breach itself and the response, the interruption costs. Again, it's going to be the if you're shut down, the loss of earnings, any damage to certain systems, you're going to be able to replace those. All depends on the type of policy. And you know, the types of policies, you're reading the fine print. One of the things that really surprised me about this insurance ecosystem is that the lack of standardization. So if you talk to one carrier about the security controls and what the processes are, and you go talk to another one, they're going to be quite different. And there's just really no standardization. The application processes are different, and it's really what's best suited for you and your company. And then they're going to pay for or cover the cyber extortion and the ransomware piece. So Matt was really great bringing up the types of ransomware, and you know, if there's a ransom involved, and you have to make that call. If there's an insurance policy involved, it's more, instead of an individual company decision, the insurance company and breach coach are going to have a be part of that conversation. So, and I opened this by talking about why cyber insurance. This right here is what I meant by peace of mind, and that if, you know, I've got all this security in place, but if there's no silver bullet, and if you have a material breach, what you're going to do about it, this is what a typical policy can cover. So a little bit more about the tiering. So just like, you know, any type of policy, you can get a certain type of policy. If you don't want to attest to having these security controls in place, you can get a policy. However, if you want one that has the coverage that I mentioned on the previous slide, there are going to be requirements. They're going to have security control requirements that my next slide will detail. And, you know, it's kind of, you know, how much attestation do you want to go through based on the policy that you're looking for? Side note, you know, lean on your broker. That is what their role in this is to make sure that they understand your risk, understand your needs, and go to the different carriers to find the policy for you. And a good policy is going to include, you know, the premium based on a couple of things. Your industry, right? If you're in a certain industry, it's going to be a little tougher. If you have a lot of customer records, you are more risky than somebody that doesn't. And so the terms are going to be based on security posture is just one, but industry, your company size, and your number of records are really, really important. And then there are policies out there where you would have to have the cost up front and you file a claim. Highly recommend looking at the ones that are on a pay on behalf, where you're not out money in the middle of the fire. I mean, your hair's on fire, you're in the middle of a breach situation. The last thing you want to do is worrying about paying things to get them fixed, whereas a good quality policy is going to be taking care of that and as part of the policy terms. So what are those requirements that we talked about? And I've got a couple slides here about how to navigate this ecosystem. um, backups. And if you have a backups and they're not immutable, meaning they are still connected, because a lot of customers will have a backup solution that they think that if they have an incident, that they're going to be able to back up easily. But if it's not immutable, and it's basically, if it's connected to your infrastructure, they can get there too, and you can have the whole thing encrypted, including your backup. So really, understanding your backup strategy and how you communicate that to the carrier is super important. Multi-factor authentication, that was a big one a few years ago, and still is. It's required in every quality policy that I've been involved with. And the key piece there is it's got to be on every machine. So there's been a couple of incidents that have been litigated where the customer had MFA. They attested that they had it, but the machine that was vulnerable and got hit did not have MFA on it. In the incident response engagement, they're going to find that out, and the court ruled in the carrier's favor that they didn't have to pay that policy because MFA was not on the machine that was hit. Detection and response. This was basically last summer, where EDR was mandated from most carriers, and I put detection and response there on purpose, because there's EDR out there, there's XDR, MDR, NDR, and really what the carriers care about is the DR portion of that. So whether you have an EDR or XDR solution, that will qualify you from most carriers. And the reason for that is, as opposed to a traditional EPP platform, EDR provides the telemetry. So in a breach incident, having that telemetry will help shorten the incident and really minimize the damage. So if you have an EPP plan and you're looking to go to and looking at cyber insurance, just be prepared to have that conversation internally that you're going to need a detection and response solution. Incident response plan, documented and tested. I cannot stress this enough. In fact, Jeff, if you ask me, what my one takeaway is, it's this: if you don't have a plan, please start that process. I'm going to give you my contact information, but I'm sure that you've got people that you can look to, but I would be glad to help with that. In fact, I have a slide for solution. And then employee cyber awareness training. We do this at Trend every 6 months. And if you do not pass, it's not a fun process. And it's just, but it does allow you to understand how tough it is to see a phishing email, and that you shouldn't click. And if you do click, don't enter your credentials. And it's just a really good way for people for the water to rise for a customer's cybersecurity resiliency, is training the employees. Some carriers require this, most recommend it, but I would venture to say in the next 6, 12, 18 months, most carriers will start mandating this, because it's not that tough to implement depending on the size of your organization. So these are the requirements. How to navigate. So I'm starting to get to the summary piece here, is get your security house in order. Matt kind of mentioned about the lack of government interaction from a legislative standpoint, and I would say that it's very accurate, is that cyber insurance and these carriers have become the de facto tip of the spear for security guidance. Resiliency has gone up. So threats have stayed where they continue to kind of go up and to the right, but breaches are down and claims are down because of the resiliency that cyber insurance, the whole ecosystem, has been driving everybody to get MFA, to get backups, to get EDR. And so, until the government does step in, the cyber insurance ecosystem has become the de facto tip of the spear. And again, they're requiring it to get a policy because they have skin in the game, right? And if they write a bunch of policies and they don't have the right policies and security solutions in place, they're on the hook for it. So That's what's driving this. And again, the DR part of that is super important. Getting quality advice, getting a broker that you know, trust, understand, and then I would encourage to proactively reach out to your breach coach. And if you don't have one, and you have a policy, you can ask your broker and carrier to talk to them. If you do not have a policy, I can help in that regard as well. But your GC or your law advice can help. And the entity that sold you your general liability. So if you don't have a cyber insurance policy, you probably have a general liability or a D&O policy, and the broker involved there can help you with that. But understand, having a broker and a breach coach and having those proactive conversations is advised. And then again, I'm saying it for a third time, to create an IR plan in order to be prepared that if something happens, here's what I'm going to do about it. So from a risk management strategy, attack surface risk management is really 3 different areas, and this is the getting you prepared to talk to that underwriter, whether you're renewing a policy or getting a new one. Talking about attack surface risk management, where you discover the assets, you prioritize and assess the risk of those assets, and then you mitigating it. This little 3-pronged strategy can show that cyber security maturity that the carriers are looking for. And then another way of looking at it is, on the left side of this are the different attack vectors that Matt mentioned several of them. And up on the top one is the different types of assets that you may or may not have in your environment. And then just the thought processes inside of an attack surface risk management strategy that will show that maturity to the underwriter and get you the right policy. I mentioned the example of a breach response plan or an incident response plan. I highly recommend this one from Net Diligence, and would love to forward you their way if you're looking at getting an incident response plan. It helps you name your breach coach if you don't have a policy. If you have a policy, you can get one of these from your carrier, but if you don't, and you want to have a plan of if the house catches on fire, this is what I would recommend. It helps you name a breach coach, helps you name an incident response vendor. And if you're choosing not to do insurance, this can go a long way in preparing you of if something goes sideways. So in summary, cyber insurance market is softening. So it had to harden first in order to soften. So, if you're looking at cyber insurance costs of, just a year ago, it was difficult. I mean, again, premiums up because of the response of the ransomware outbreaks. It is softening, but they're looking for good posture. They're looking for cybersecurity maturity, and that you may have risk in your environment. You may not on their application be able to check yes on every box, but as long as you understand that and can communicate your risk posture to the underwriters and to brokers, you're going to be in a good spot. I mentioned earlier about the lack of standardization. Don't expect to talk to one broker or carrier and get the same answers from the others, and just really a challenge sometimes if you're looking to at multiple options in order to get a policy. And again, getting good advice, and I've said it many times today, the cybersecurity maturity. So thank you for the time, my name is Vince Kearns. There's my email address, and we also have an email address if you'd like. And I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right, Vince, and I'm going to put you on the hot seat here with some questions. I tell you, when I think about cybersecurity in the broad sense, cyber insurance is one of those things that has just changed so dramatically. And I love that timeline that you laid out, because it felt like it was changing overnight, and it really almost has, right? As we look at that. So I want to go back to the metaphor you used in one of the slides about driving and the telemetry and the car insurance companies that are gathering the data from that. How are the cyber insurance companies gathering more of that real-time data on me as my company as their client? Are they plugging
Well,
into my systems in some ways?
first of all, it's customer. You know, it's not as prevalent. I'm saying that's where we're heading, and because of the car insurance, and most security providers have an API that the insurance company can ingest in order to see that. But it has to be approved by you. They're not going to go be pulling a bunch of information. It's by customer choice. And
maybe I get a lower premium because of that.
Yes, that's hence that's why I use that metaphor of the Geico. If they know how I'm driving and where I'm going, and they're going to give me a better price. Same concept here. It's not very prevalent, Jeff. Now, there's two really big types of carriers in this space. You have the big guys you've heard of, so Chubb, Traveler, AIG. They're not there yet, but some of the insurtechs, as I call them, that are built on technology and assessing risk automatically, those are the ones that are really looking to ingest that. But again, it's all by customer choice.
Gotcha. Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I could almost feel the cringe from some of our viewers when you were talking about the insurance questionnaire, because man, I tell you, there are some of our viewers that get hammered with questionnaires. It's not just the cyber insurance companies. It might be their customers, especially if they're in more regulated industries. They've got compliance frameworks. Do you see any movement to standardize, to say that, hey, if you meet this compliance framework, then you've satisfied those requirements?
That gets brought up at every major event that I go to about this ecosystem is that, yes, everybody in the room would love to. It's just there's so many different the different needs in the room. The carriers could drive that, but it's not in their best interest. The federal government, that's where I kind of said, when the government steps in, just like they did with car insurance, you now have to have it, right? And until that happens, I just feel like it's going to be a little clunky and people trying to figure it out. But no, I don't have a good answer there, Jeff. I wish I did.
Yeah, and again, I'm hearing the people, feeling the people listening cringe.
Jeff, I was just real quick. I was at the last Cyber Risk Summit, and the federal government, CISA and Homeland Security, were thanking the cyber insurance ecosystem for driving resiliency because the government hasn't done much on the litigation side, the legislation side. And I kind of sat back and go, wow, we're doing the right things. It's just the insurance companies are trying to do it for one reason, and compliance is doing it for something different. So until those two meet in the middle, I think it will happen someday, but we'll see.
Well, and I think Matt said it right. No one really likes a mandate. So when the government says it's mandated, but when the insurance carrier, it's like it's hitting you in your pocketbook. You're either paying higher premiums or you're not getting coverage at all. So you kind of have to go through that underwriting process with it. But I can tell you from talking with CIOs and CTOs out there, it almost becomes a full-time job completing those questionnaires, because everybody asks the question in just a different nuance, and it's like, well, should I answer yes or should I answer no?
And it used to be simple, that it was just an IT department questionnaire, and they were responsible for the whole cyber insurance process. Now it is in every facet of the business. Our CEO says this all the time, that cyber risk is business risk. And Matt said that a couple of times, is that, and it's now in every part of a company, and especially in the boardroom, and for all the reasons that Matt detailed.
I'm going to steal that quote. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Another thing that kind of caught my attention as you were talking through this is the concept of a breach coach. Who does the breach coach work for? The insurance company, or are they a third party?
Great question. They're a third party, but they are paid in a I'm going to tell you, in a cyber insurance claim situation, they are absolutely paid as part of your policy, but they represent the customer, and they are there to do two things: maintain privilege for that customer and prevent a class action lawsuit, which the carriers are they're scared about two things: class action lawsuits and uh, a systematic attack where one vulnerability knocks out thousands. That's what the carriers worry about. But they pay the breach coach in order to maintain privilege and protect from a class action lawsuit if there's which happens unfortunately all too often.
Yeah. Well, and the metaphor that you used was the quarterback, and again, I could feel some of our viewers kind of say, "Hey, no one's going to be calling plays for me when this happens. I'm going to be running point on this." It almost feels like, in some ways, and maybe you spoke to this, Vince, as we're coming out of the last couple of years. It almost felt like health insurance, right? Your claim's going to get denied because your doctor didn't check this box, or that box. And who do I want to listen to as the patient? I want to listen to my doctor, not my insurance company. Are we coming out of that more, and it becomes more of a partnership, or is it still that my cyber insurance company is looking for a way to deny my claim?
I've heard that as I've explored different claims. I just haven't found that the carriers are they if they're on the hook, they're on the hook. And I've just really seen, other than bad attestation, so you say you have MFA or you say you have backups and you really don't, they're not going to pay that. And I just don't see that very often. I do want to throw one caveat out there: in the next 18 to 24 months, vulnerabilities that have a patch out there for an extended period. So here's the vulnerability that the bad guy uses. There's been a patch out there, Jeff, for 150 days.
Yeah.
That's being litigated. And so over the next 12, 18, 24 months, as that gets through the legal system, I think you're going to see some things around that. But for the most part, these carriers are not denying claims without what I would consider a good reason.
A good reason, yeah. Well, and I think that the patch being out there for 150, 180 days kind of goes back to a little bit about what Matt was talking about the reporting requirements, right? You got to do it. You got to do it in a certain period of time. We may begin to see that, hey, you've got to have a process in place to apply patches in 30 days, 45 days, whatever that may be. Yeah,
it's coming.
Yeah. I've seen somewhere, and I wish I could remember the source for this, but there's some discussion on Capitol Hill about legislating the whole concept of, I'm going to release software that I need to patch the next day, right? And putting some onus back on the software vendors themselves. Are you seeing that in your space, Vince?
Not. I've heard that too, and we may have read the same article, Jeff. And it's being discussed, but I have not seen anything material around that, Jeff. So, but that would not surprise me. I can put it that way.
Well, and it kind of goes back to that question that I asked Matt about. It feels like the onus is always on the consumer. In this case, that we're talking about software, the onus is always on the company to make sure that they're patching and they're doing this. And it doesn't seem like our software vendors all the time are paying enough attention to the quality that goes out the door. Maybe AI will help us with that a little bit.
AI, and then just there's couple companies out there, the 0-day initiative, for example, that is out there buying bugs, that are proactively buying 0 days, and creating protection before the patches are announced. So you kind of talked with Matt about threat intelligence, and so I just a very strong opinion that as a customer, having a good threat intelligence partner is another part of a risk management strategy.
Yeah, and I think because the threat vector is so broad, it's coming from everywhere, and it got worse, got accentuated during the pandemic when all of a sudden a friend of mine is CIO for a large company, and he said, my endpoint went from I had to protect 410 locations to overnight I had to protect 4,000 locations because now he's protecting the home network as well and trying to keep up with that. So,
yeah. Jeff, I would add one more thought to that, is that anytime there's an M&A situation where one company is acquiring another, that the company that's being acquired, as you can imagine, they kind of take their guard down. They know they're being acquired. I'm not running my IT anymore. Somebody else is. That is a fertile ground for attackers. And again, if you're the acquiring company, make sure you're exploring all options to make sure that that the company that you are acquiring is clean, because a lot of times you find out that it's too late.
Yeah. Have them fill out a questionnaire. I'm going to invite our viewers, if you have any questions that you'd like Vince to respond to, please put them in chat, put them in Q&A. I know Lonnie is out there, and she is involved in a conversation right now in chat, so be sure you read that. Maybe we'll pick on Lonnie here in a minute and see if we want to escalate any of that to the conversation. But one of the things that you said, Vince, and I wrote this down, I might have not caught exactly the way you worded it, but I thought what you said was, if you're in a certain industry, it's going to be tougher for you to get coverage.
Yeah, 100%.
What industries are going to be the tough ones to get coverage?
Gambling industry. If you're in the gambling industry, okay. So, and I'm not talking about MGM. Like, there's some stuff going on there in Vegas right now. Not the illegal gambling, anything illegal, right? Gambling, the pornographic industry. So those type of industries like that. And then there's going to be ones that just inherently, if your industry keeps customer records, then it's going to make you more risky. And then just the whole other thing of having records, whether you're in a risky industry or not. But yeah, it's, I don't know who all of our participants are.
Yeah.
I doubt that any of them are in one of those industries, but it's.
Well, you never know. You never know.
But then if you look at manufacturing versus something, manufacturing is a very risky, they're number 3 behind government and finance. And so, but if you're in, if in other industries that aren't targeted by the cyber criminals, then you're pretty good and you're less risky.
Gotcha. Well, and I assume this is Lonnie that has turned the camera on. Hi, Lonnie.
Yes.
Is there anything that's been going on in chat that you'd like to either summarize or throw a question to Vince?
Well, I think I just want to bring it up to the top, because I don't know who all our audience members are, but I think it's really important to maybe delve into this topic a little bit more. So Vince, just in case you didn't see it, the original question was from Sam, and they're talking about customers that they have who say they're getting incident response included from their cyber insurance carrier. And he's just wondering what thoughts on the value and the limitations of that versus engaging with a breach coach or IR provider. So I've answered some of that to the extent of what I believe and what we believe the limitations are by adopting an incident response vendor that your carrier is assigning to you versus utilizing one that you're familiar with. So I was hoping you could maybe go into a little more depth about the pros and cons of that, so the audience really understands what they're getting into if they choose to go that route with their insurance carrier versus selecting their own breach coach and or incident response vendor.
Yeah, great question. And you're right. I just kind of brushed over the process. So when you hit the claim button, whether it goes straight to the carrier or straight to the breach coach gets involved very, very quickly. They have what's called a carrier approved breach panel. That is a list of IR vendors that the breach coach is in charge of choosing that IR vendor. So to answer the question, you do not have a choice out of the box of which incident response vendor is assigned to you, what tools they use, none of that. Now, you can proactively talk to your broker about talking to the carrier about, I would like to have this company to do the incident response. And if they're not approved, they can go through a process of an off-panel approval. So, and then really your breach coach, if you are very comfortable with a law firm that you would rather have as your breach coach, that would be, it's a little risky in my opinion, because the breach coaches that we work with and that the carriers work with have significant experience in cyber and these incidents, and they're really good at what they do. And so, at the end of the day, it's your policy, you're paying for it, and if you want those choices, you can ask for it, but also understand that the carrier can say no because they're on the hook. And so if you it's a negotiation, but it's your policy, and you have every right to ask for it and bring that up with your broker or carrier.
And I'll just add on to Vince really quick. So what's the benefit to you for choosing the IR vendor of your choice? And I'm going to go back to, if you have a certain EDR technology deployed in your environment, chances are whatever company is sitting on that carrier's breach panel, they are probably not going to deploy the same technology in your environment to get to the root of the issue. So there's a time to contain issue that arises, but also they're not using the tech that you invested in. And so by taking that proactive step of reaching out to your broker or your carrier and saying, I want XYZ company to be my IR vendor of choice, you've kind of solidified who you want because they can respond the fastest and are familiar with the technology that you have in your environment. So that time to contain has been shortened, and you're basically retaining your investment in the security stack of technology that you have, but also identifying who's going to handle that mitigation and resolution, so you don't have to worry about other tools getting deployed in your environment that might take a little bit longer.
Excellent, Lonnie. Great points.
All right, Vince. And another question that came up as you were talking. Part of the coverage may include coverage of lost sales. When you think about that, is it time boxed? Or because one of the risks that you face if you get that hack is that reputational impact. How long of a time frame can I claim a hit in sales because of a cyber event?
That is, I've heard that conversation happen a couple times, and it is, if you talk to a carrier, it's very short. If you talk to an insured, it's very long. And so, the time to talk about that, this is really how I would answer this, Jeff, is don't wait until you're in the middle of a breach or right after it to have that conversation. Proactiveness, and again, being proactive, having an incident response plan, having thought through these things and talked to them. No question is off base when it comes to talking to the people you need to trust, your broker and your breach coach in particular. And so just have those questions answered up front, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, it's always good to talk in advance, right? And it goes along with what Lonnie was talking about. If you've got an IR company, if you've got these connections already, these relationships already, it's good to do that up front. It's going to make things easier than trying to do it in the eye of the storm. Yep. So one last question, Vince, and similar to what I asked Matt, what's one thing out of your deck, out of your message today, what's an action our listeners can take tomorrow because they listened to your talk today?
If you don't have an incident response plan, start the process to create one. If you have an incident response plan and it's sitting in your desk, take a look at it and practice it and bring it up to those that matter. And overall, just being prepared, having conversations before an incident is 100% of the time better than having those conversations when the house is on fire. Yeah. So that's a long way, Jeff, of saying be proactive.
I love that, though. Having that incident response plan is so important, and it fits very well with what Matt said at the beginning of today, is being prepared and having that plan, going through those conversations it's just so important.
Yes.
Vince, thank you very much for carving out time to visit with us today. Lonnie, thank you for your time and handling the chat behind the scenes. I really appreciate that. Appreciate you both taking the time to talk with our listeners today.
Jeff, anytime. Call me anytime. And thank you all for allowing us to share the day with you. Have a good one.
Hey, I may take you up on that and have you as a guest on Status Go sometime.
Giddy up.
All right. Well, thank you very much.